Welcome to Grit Meets Growth. Today we are joined by Damian Reed. Damian Reed created Damian M International specifically to help women who run service-based businesses and feel controlled by that business because it is no longer giving them the life they imagined. We are excited to hear Damian's story and insights into his work. So welcome, Damian. Thanks a lot
Thank you.
for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure. Cool. Then we'll just get right into it, and I'll start with the first question that I have, which is like when you were choosing different career paths, how did you decide, or how did you end up with this? Like, what was it a particular process, or just a turn of events, so that everyone just knows for the beginning of it?
So this career path, I would say, actually is a combination of the different choices that I made throughout my whole career from a very young age. So the first business that I ever started, I started when I was 13 years old. I also come from a family of entrepreneurs. So there's, three generations of entrepreneurs, including myself. And there may be more. I just know I'm aware of three, all the way back to my grandfather having his own business. So that was sort of the beginning part of my life. And I was actually headed on a very different path. I was headed into the medical field, and a series of events happened that had me take a detour, and I ended up in corporate Canada and had a successful career in the corporate world. Was responsible at a national level with the major telecommunications companies here in Canada. And again, series of events sort of led me back to my entrepreneurial roots and wanting to have my own business and support other people with their businesses. And so I did that for a period of time after leaving, big company, corporate Canada. And then the next phase of my life had me in the personal development industry. So I was part of the staff for an international training and development company. And as a part of being in that environment, I also started leading their top leadership program, seminars, and courses for them. And so I got training in leading to hundreds of people, thousands of people over a period of 7 to 10 years. And then after leaving that, I had to sort of step back and say, okay, well, what was next for me? And this, where I landed now, was a natural evolution of all of that work. So I was bringing all of my experience from working with major corporations, all of my experience from being in an entrepreneurial environment from a very young age, being passionate about entrepreneurs, and then add to that all of my experience of working in a transformational space and training and developing people for a decade and understanding how to make a difference with folks that way. It all sort of came together in my mind to be like, okay, well, I can see how I can make a difference by bringing all of those elements together and making a difference with the people that I'm committed to making a difference with.
Perfect. So basically, like, obviously you come with a lot of experience, but then there were a lot of relevant experiences that sort of shaped maybe the path of how you wanted to start this. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's sometimes that's a common theme with many small business owners, that their life experiences take them to a particular path, and it just makes sense. That it's a combination of business experience, business savvy, and a passion. And I've always had a passion for making a difference with people, and this is an expression of that.
like, just as a person, like, do you believe in terms of planning things out in like having everything planned, or is that something like you go with the flow and you're like, okay, things will happen how they happen? So
That's a
how is
great
that for you?
question. That's a really, really
Mhm.
great question, Manav. So I do believe in planning. When I work with my clients, I work from a planning structure. And the particular planning process that I embrace or I endorse is having a long-term vision. And, I usually work with people on a time horizon of about 10 years. And so if you're clear where you want your life to be in all the different key life areas 10 years from now, then you're able to walk it backwards to milestones. So you could say, all right, well, if that's where I want to be in 10 years, then in 5 years, I want to be at this milestone in these areas. And in 3 years, I want to be at these milestones. And in 1 year, I want to be at these milestones. And then you can create a plan to just go to work on the 1 year time horizon. You don't have to worry about the 10-year time horizon. But where I think I differ than a lot of people who work inside of that planning space is I have uh, a very healthy relationship for myself and my clients with that 1 year time horizon. Look, life happens, right? So where we stand in January and the perspective that we have on the year, we're talking January 2025, but where we stand today and what our life is going to look like and what we're going to think about our life in December of 2025 and who we will be different people. And so you have to leave room for your development, for your growth inside of those milestones, so that if there are things that you don't accomplish inside of the milestones that you set for yourself, that you can learn from them, that you can step back and say, okay, maybe I didn't accomplish that milestone, but what did I learn from not accomplishing that milestone that I can take forward with me that will still allow me to achieve the 10-year horizon? Maybe I'm moving that milestone from the 1 year timeline to a 2 year timeline or 2.5 year timeline. So it's important, if you have the vision that's a long-term vision, then you don't get yourself stuck and upset and frustrated by not hitting a short-term milestone.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, obviously, like for me, it's been like 6.5 years in the overall career sort of space after my college. So I don't really have that many years of experience, but yeah,
Uh-huh.
even with whatever I've seen, I guess you can't really predict everything, right? Like, obviously, you want to plan things out, you want to, which is essential, right? Like, obviously, without a plan, then you're just doing anything in random, and then like it's like just mostly doesn't really work. But then like just being sure that okay, this is how everything will pan out, it's very difficult. So
Yeah,
that certain room of something happening by itself has to always be there, because at times that small element is really magical and it can just change the course of your life.
absolutely. Yeah, so things can happen, and I believe that when you create the vision and you start to put the energy into things, you attract things into your life. You attract different things that you may not have ever seen, and that also influences your ability to reach that long-term vision. On the flip side of that, I think that if anything, COVID taught the people who are super planners that you can't anticipate everything, right? No one could see the COVID pandemic coming. No one could see the world
Yeah,
shutting down for a period of time. There was no way to plan for that. And so that was one of those things where an unexpected situation would have to have people go, okay, I'm going to adjust. Now, what's great, if you had a 10-year vision about where you wanted to be, then COVID was just a hiccup. It was a stop, and you could change your milestones and say, all right, well, I'm still going to achieve this 10 years from now, 5 years from now. Maybe I need to adjust my 3 year horizon, my 1 year horizon, because now I'm dealing with a global situation that I have no control over. So, how do I adjust and still look forward to where I want to be in my future?
makes like
Yeah.
COVID is one element, I guess, that just comes in every podcast from a different sort of an angle, because like it has really changed things, perspectives, like everything. So yeah,
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
agree on that. Cool. So I was going through your website, right, and really, I was just looking
Oh
at
no, you were going through it. It's so funny because I just finished. I heard you do the introduction, and I just finished doing a rebrand, and we're just about to redo the website. So the website that you're looking at is a little bit dated in terms of my brand positioning, but go ahead and ask the question about the website.
for sure. But I guess the this one will still say, because this is more in terms of the 7 steps to the freedom lifestyle that you
Yes.
really emphasize. So
Yes.
if you can just talk to us about that a bit.
Yeah, so that's something that I am super excited about. So in the work that I have done over the past several years with entrepreneurs, and I've worked with thousands of people, I noticed that for the most part, entrepreneurs have given up. Even they may not say it, but they've given up on the possibility of realizing the kind of life that they imagined when they started their business. Often people are working way more hours than they thought they would be working. They're making less money than they imagined that they would be making, or they're not getting the amount of money that they're worth. So their value is not being, recognized. They might be now into competing on price as opposed to providing value, and they don't feel good about that. And the third major issue that I notice people dealing with is often they don't have enough time left, or they're not able to spend time on all the other key life areas that are important to them. And so in the immediate term, they don't experience living the kind of life that they want. And the longer term impact, or the medium to long term impact of that, is that because they're not living the life that they didn't imagine right now, they start to project that life into the future. So they start to think that maybe because I'm not living that life now, I'm not going to live that life in the future. So there's a subtle resignation or a subtle giving up on their dreams, on their vision, on the idea that they have for the future. And a lot of times they don't share it, right? So it's an internal thing. They might still say, "Oh, this is what I'm going for," and blah blah blah, but inside there's some resignation and there's some giving up. And that was a situation that I saw over and over and over and over and over. And so I decided I was going to do something about it. And I recognized that inside of the industry, or inside of the world of entrepreneurialism, there's so much information, right? All of us are so there's more information being I don't know I can't remember what the stats are, but I know that the amount of information being generated and put onto the internet is just going up exponentially. So more and more is available. And as business owners, we're starting to consume books, podcasts, YouTube videos. We go to courses and then we take the courses and we never do the things that we learned in the courses. They end up on the bookshelf. So, most entrepreneurs can start to relate to at least something of what I'm talking about, right? This is all this information. And the challenge with consuming all this information is that it's confusing. Because what happens when I read one book and it says I should do this, and then I listen to a podcast and it says I should do the exact opposite, and then I go to a course and it tells me I should do something completely different. And so I wanted to create something that was simple, that would allow a business owner, an entrepreneur, someone who wanted to live a particular kind of life, to define what their ideal life is, to map out what it would take to achieve that life, and then to be able to take the minimal amount of steps possible to start to put the things in place so that they could achieve that life. And, I call that a freedom lifestyle. That's just my term for it. And everybody's vision of what their freedom lifestyle is very different. You could call it the ideal life, same thing, right?
Yeah.
So what you want as a business owner, what I want as a business owner is very, very different. But to both of us, it means a certain amount of freedom. But people are driven by 4 primary types of freedom. They're driven by financial freedom, location freedom, responsibility freedom, or time freedom. Okay, so those are the sort of 4 major groups. And so as I said, I wanted to make this as simple as possible. So I created this system called the 7 Steps to Your Freedom Lifestyle. And it accomplishes exactly that. It starts with you getting very clear about what's the things that are most important to you. What are the foundational pillars for you as a human being? It then goes into having you map out what that ideal life is for you. And then there's a sequence of steps to take you through how do you put the things in place to actually accomplish that, whether that be, things for having you work more in your zone of genius, for you having your teams take things away from you, to time management, organization, how do you work on the things that are most important, etc. And then the 7th step is called ascend. And in the ascend step, you stop and you go back to step 1 and you reassess. So you're like, okay, is the things that I said were important to me when I last did step 1 still important to me? Are this the long-term vision still the long-term vision I'm committed to? Because maybe that changed while I was doing all the other steps. Maybe I want to add something. Maybe I want to take something away. What's my next short-term horizon? What's the next thing that I want to work on? And then you start the steps over again. So it's circular. And my goal is to be able to put this out there in the world for entrepreneurs to be able to use however they want to do it. So this year, I'm writing a book that people will be able to buy the book, go to my website, download a workbook for free, be able to work through that on their own. Or I'm going to start a community, an online community, if they want to participate online and be in a community that's also working on that together. They'll be able to do that. And I've been offering this work one-on-one with private clients for several years now, which is how I've developed and fine-tuned the system. Fine-tuning the system is all about what can I take out? I need to keep taking things out to make it simpler and simpler and simpler. And so people can get into it however they want. For the cost of buying a book on Amazon or Kindle, they can get access to it and go to town. So for me, and then the other thing I'm going to do is later this year, I'm going to start training other coaches in how they can integrate that into their practice so that people can use this simple system to help people. And the system is really designed for longevity, right? If you learn the system and you apply the system and you stay true to it, you can use it for the rest of your life. And you can use it for the rest of your life and not have to, not keep working with me. All you need to do is learn the principles and then you can do it on your own. And the one thing that I'm really proud of with the system is that all of that reading, all of those podcasts, all of those things that we do, all those courses we go to and learn, if you want to take information from that and integrate it into the 7 steps, like if there's pieces that you think work for you, you can do that. So it's agnostic to those things, but it gives you the core foundation of what's necessary to design that ideal life and live that ideal life. So I know that was a very long answer to the 7 steps question, but it is something I'm passionate about, and I'm excited to have it roll out even bigger in the world this year.
No, I guess I can really see the passion in the answer itself, but I guess it's even essential to answer that in that way, because then we're like just touching bases on things which won't really help or someone who's trying to understand that principle or the complete methodology. So yeah, but I really loved the way that how you bifurcated the freedoms, right? Like obviously we always talk about freedom, but this is the first time I'm hearing the freedom in, let's say, broken it down into 4 different categories, because
Yeah.
like freedom is again, right, a loosely sort of a word that like everyone says that they want freedom, but what exactly sort of freedom are they
Yes.
chasing? And every time when someone wants something, there is a particular reason why they are chasing it. Like, let's say
Hmm.
if you talk about money, right, like one of the biggest things that we keep on hearing is most of the time that when people are more ambitious are the ones that haven't really seen that sort of a money in their childhood. So
Yes.
let's say that is the driven sort of a reason why someone wants to do that.
Yep.
So again, right, like it's essential to understand what sort of freedom are you looking for, because at times people are looking for one type of freedom or the other, or maybe all four.
Yes.
But then planning or maybe taking steps to achieve that freedom will only align when you understand what sort of freedom are you looking for, because just
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I have a private client that I work with who's amazing. She has one company, and then she has a senior role in another company that she's a partner with, and her primary motivation is financial freedom. But there is a method to the thinking that has her have financial freedom be her primary freedom style, because there are things in her life that line up with the achievement of that financial freedom. So for her, the way that her mind works and the way she thinks is the achievement of the financial freedom gives me the access to the other things that I want.
to
Whereas if you look at someone like me, my primary freedom style is location freedom. The most important thing for me is to be able to work from anywhere. My office fits into a backpack, and I'm proud of it. And I want to be able to take my backpack and go work at a Starbucks, or work on the beach, or travel and be able to work from around the world. That's what makes a difference to me. And yeah, sure, money is important to me, but money is only important to me as much as it provides me the access and the ability to have the freedom of location. And so understanding how people's primary freedom styles are oriented allows us to, when we understand it about ourselves, it allows us to make the specific choices in our life. And when I'm working with people, or when other people are working with business owners, and they understand their orientation around those freedoms, plus other things, there are other tests and so forth that I have space to include inside of the 7 steps. It's not just about understanding your primary freedom style, but then, how is your mind oriented? How do you respond emotionally? When you're stressed, how does your emotional behavior change? There are other tools and assessments that can help you leverage your strengths and understand how you're made up as a human being, so that you are a much stronger and more powerful entrepreneur. And there's space to plug those into the 7-step system, so that we've got all the tools that we need to be the best person that we can be, and then that translates into being the best business owner that we could be.
totally makes sense. Cool, right? So we obviously talk about your business, some of your principles, like, but one more question that I really want to know about, because when I was looking at your website, like you specifically mentioned that you, let's say, working with women entrepreneurs is, let's say, that's the niche that you've chosen, right?
Yeah.
So coaching in itself is a niche, and then specifically women is a niche, and then women entrepreneurs is a super niche, right? So
Yeah.
like, can you just emphasize or let people know a bit more about choosing a very, like, the importance of choosing a very specific niche? Because like from your website, it was very clear that you have done that like really well, and I was like, okay, you can really answer that question.
Yeah, I can. So I'm going to say, I'm going to answer your question. But before I answer the question, I'm going to tell you that when my new website comes out, just so that this doesn't confuse anybody if they go to the website and find me. So with the new website that I was talking about, I have changed my specific niche specifically from women entrepreneurs. And if you read the new copy for the website, it will say heart-centered, passionate entrepreneurs as a specific niche. But let me talk about choosing a specific niche in general, and then I'll talk about the heart-centered, passionate entrepreneurs that I now chose as a niche. So choosing a specific niche, or niching down, as people start to say, is an important concept in marketing. for a lot of different reasons. So there's that saying that you can't build a business to serve everybody, because then you end up serving nobody.
Nobody.
And what that means is that if your message is too general, nobody relates to it, and you will not be able to position your brand in a way to attract the kind of clients that you want to work with. So when I teach this, so I teach a number of different entrepreneur courses. When I teach this, I use the example of Apple because it's a brand that people are very familiar with. And if you look at Apple's advertising, you can get really clear about who Apple's target market is. Their target market is the teenager to young 20-something-year-old, because every time you see an ad, that's who you see in the ad using an iPad or an iMac. You see someone in the garage, you doing music with the GarageBand app or whatnot. Those are the people you see in Apple ads. Now, is Apple only selling to teenagers and early 20s? No, they're not. I have an iPhone. I'm doing this broadcast with you on a MacBook. I buy Apple products. But what happens is, by Apple targeting that specific group of people, their messaging can be very clear. So they don't have a very diverse set of, you don't see an ad where there's an older person like me in one ad and then a teenager in another ad, and then people are confused. It's like, I don't understand what Apple is about. Apple sells the technology experience. Now, you could make the argument that Apple's losing their technology war because, other brands have caught up and they have better cameras and so forth. But the brand perception is that Apple is a technology leader. And they continue to have that because they keep positioning themselves as the go-to tool for the young person. All right, so that's a wide version of like why you want to niche in your marketing messaging and so forth. So the same applies to a small business owner, right? If you're doing work and you've got this whole world that you could solve, you don't have an unlimited marketing budget. If Apple decides to micro niche, then like a niche down, then somebody who's running a small business better niche down, because there's no way you've got the marketing budget that Apple has. So you better figure out a way to get the message out to the people that you really want to get the message to. And so what the idea about it is that you decide who is that bullseye at the center of the bullseye that you're aiming for. Who's ideal? Like what's the demographics? What's the psychographics? What's their geographic location? What kind of social media do they use? Where do you find them? How do you reach them? All of that. And you start doing the messaging for that person. Some people call it a customer avatar or a customer profile. That specific profile is who you start marketing to. Mine is called Susan. I've written out Susan. It happens to be a woman, even though I'm doing heart-centered, passionate entrepreneurs, which I'm going to come back to. My ideal profile is still a woman entrepreneur, a woman business owner. It's just not going to be how I articulate it on the website. And so everything that I write is written for Susan. I understand, where she lives. I understand her psychology, etc. And so people who are like Susan will hear that message as it applies to them, and it'll make sense to them. People who are similar to Susan will also hear that message, and some of it will resonate with them. So the further I go away from the center of the bullseye, where Susan is at the center of the bullseye, people will identify less and less and less with the messaging. But the very, very center will identify the people who are just like Susan, who are my customer profile. So then let me go back to this heart-centered, passionate entrepreneur thing for a second. I'll tell you why I changed. So in the beginning of 2024, I realized that I had been increasing my prices over the previous 5 years. And the kinds of customers that I was starting to work with were not the kind of customers that really gave me the joy that I wanted to experience as a business owner. And yes, they could afford to work with me, but they were different psychographically than than my favorite customers, the ideal customers that I wanted to work with. And so I made a decision that was not a normal business decision in 2024. I dropped my prices because I went out and I did market research with the ideal customers that I wanted to work with. And I found out that many of those people would not have signed up with me, ones that I'd worked with in the past, that they would have not have chosen to work with me at my current price levels. They would have said, I don't want to take the risk to pay that. So I reduced my prices to bring my pricing back in line with who my favorite clients were and what they would be willing to pay. And immediately upon doing that, I saw business increase because I was able to see that those people were then being able attracted to that price point. So I also had to look and see, well, how do I define this group? Because it wasn't just women. There were women entrepreneurs who were in one group, and there were women entrepreneurs who I was working with that were paying the higher price point. So clearly it wasn't just women entrepreneurs. So who it is for me today is I define it as heart-centered, passionate entrepreneurs. These are entrepreneurs who are really committed to the business that they do. They have their heart in their business. And for me, working with them brings me a lot of joy because I'm able to support them in fulfilling the dream that they have about their business. And so there is some similarity to the copy on the new website as to the old one. But there's a new tagline. So the new tagline is scale without sacrifice. So that's very much in line with the 7 steps to the freedom lifestyle, to your freedom lifestyle system, right? So it's growing your business, but also maintaining your ideal life. And how do you do that? And I still think that there are more women that are heart-centered, passionate entrepreneurs than there are men who are heart-centered, passionate entrepreneurs. But the difference now is that if a man comes to my website and he's a heart-centered, passionate entrepreneur, he won't feel excluded because my website before said that I work with women entrepreneurs. Before, he would feel like I wouldn't want to work with him. And that wasn't the truth. It really wasn't the truth. I wanted to work with the people who are passionate about their business.
That's very well explained and like makes a lot of sense. And like for me, it has been only marketing because that's the only field that I have been after my college, and I really understand the importance of the niche because that's something that we emphasize to any and every client that we work with, that we really need to identify and we need to just niche down on the right target audience for us, because when we're like, oh, we want to target everyone, it's like we're not really targeting anyone.
Yes.
And then we're just competing on one thing, which will be price, which is not a good sort of a game to play every time, especially for the type of competitive market it is right now, and it is going to be more competitive in the near future. So
yeah, for sure.
Cool. Moving on to the next part, right, which is, let's not now talk about some numbers and let's say the different channels. So like as a business, obviously we both are BNI members, and that's primarily how we sort of connected. But can you just break down the different channels that bring in business for you? They can be online, offline, so that anyone who's looking to start a business knows that these are the areas that they need to focus on to generate some business.
So we're both, as you said, we're both members of BNI, Business Network International. And so, just by being members of that community, I think it's safe to say that we both understand the importance of referral marketing and referral networking. Most of my business, I would say north of 80% of my business has been because of referrals in my network or from previous clients. The kind of work that I do in this business, as a business consultant, coach, mentor, means that people have to trust me before they hire me, because they're agreeing to put themselves in a coaching relationship, which means that they're agreeing in some part to following my advice if I'm working with them as a mentor or consultant. As a coach, the coaching relationship, so I do distinguish between coaching, mentoring, and consulting, right? A coaching relationship can be more of a inquiry relationship where many coaches will lead by passive inquiry. So they're asking questions and having the client come up with the answers. And in a number of different international coaching organizations, there's kind of a rule of thumb that you never give clients answers. I don't believe in that methodology of coaching exclusively, because I think there's another type of coaching which you see in, for example, the sporting world. If you watch someone who's coaching an athlete, they don't coach by inquiry. They like, how do you feel about running laps today? That's not a way of that's not a coaching way in that methodology. It's like, I want you to go run 10 sets of this kind of exercise. I want you to go do the gym. I want you to, because the coach has a perspective of what's needed for performance and can then take that experience and bring it to the athlete. So in my coaching relationship, I combine both of them, the passive inquiry technique as well as directive coaching. So there's non-directive coaching and directive coaching. That's what they're called in the industry. So I combine those two in the coaching relationships that I have. In a mentoring relationship that I have with people will come to me as needed. So it's on demand. And so normally what that looks like is every 2 to 3 months, someone will schedule a mentoring session with me, and they will come with, they'll come with a list of things that they want to go over, and we'll work through it together. And then they walk away with a whole series of action items or things they need to follow up on. And I don't see them again for another 2 to 3 months. The consulting relationship is also a completely different thing. In that scenario, I'll meet with someone for half a day or for a full day. And again, we're working to solve a number of different problems that they're bringing to the table. But then I might not see that person. They walk away with their solutions. I might not see that person again for another 9 months to a year. And that's a different relationship as well. So I work across those three different models. Now, back to your question. I because I was using those three words interchangeably, and I wanted to make sure that people understood what I mean by them. Like I said, about 80% of my business comes from referrals, because people are engaging in those kind of relationships where they're coming to me and looking to me for that expertise and experience. And so, yes, social media is a way that people understand what I do, but it doesn't make sales for me. Social media is more like social proof. So if someone gets a referral to, like, I'm referred to them, they go on my social media to look and see, like, oh, like, what does this guy say? How does he speak? What does he post on social media? Who's he connected to? And they look at things like LinkedIn for evidence that I actually know what I'm talking about and I can do. They'll look for things like this podcast. Once you publish the podcast, I'll put a link to it on my LinkedIn. And so they can go and look at me speaking, and they're like, okay, I think I like the way he's talking. I think I like what he's saying. But they generally will come to that from a referral. And the combination of social media plus the person who referred them to me tends to take me about 70 to 80% of the sale, that combination.
Got it.
The other 20% of my sales are done through something that I do called a Your Freedom Lifestyle Discovery Call. And so my discovery calls are a little different. I schedule them for 20 minutes. When the person books the discovery call, they get some prompts, and the prompts let them think about what they're coming to the discovery call to discuss. And I usually ask things like, what challenges are they dealing with? What goals do they want to achieve? And what are the things that are in their way? And then for 20 minutes, I just give them everything I've got as a solution to what they share with me. I record the call. I use AI to generate the transcript. I use AI to generate the call summary. And so they get the call summary, the recording, and the transcript. And it's just value, 20 minutes of value. If someone says to me during that discovery call, oh, like, what would it be like to work with you? How do you, how much do you charge for coaching? Any of those types of questions, I always tell them that we're not doing that in this call. They can schedule another call with me to talk about that, right? Because the sole purpose for me of that call is to give value. So about 20% of my business comes from those calls turning into people who want to work with me in one of those other capacities. And how they find me to do those 20-minute calls differs. So lead magnets, social media, my referral network will send people to me and tell them about the 20-minute call and so forth. So that's that everything for me funnels to the discovery
Got it.
call. Yeah.
That's cool. So that's definitely helpful for someone who is looking to start their own sort of a business, because that's what the major intent of the podcast is.
Yeah.
Now we're coming to the last sort of segments of the podcast, where the second last thing that I have for you is the question is basically like one advice that you would like to give to youngsters or someone who is looking to start their own business.
This is always a good question because it's always what's top of mind. So I can tell you the first thing that came to my mind. So the first thing that came to my mind was that you need to understand that being an entrepreneur requires resilience. If you look at any of the entrepreneurs that people like to hold up as examples of, look at this person, Elon Musk, or Bill Gates or Walt Disney, any of these people, they had massive amounts of failures in their life, right? All we look at when we see those people is their successes, but we don't always stop to look at how many times they had to fail in order to get to where they got to. And so if my advice to anyone starting a business is to embrace resilience and also embrace failure, not as a problem, but as a learning opportunity. Every time you fail, it's an opportunity to discover the thing that doesn't work so that you can move on to something that does work. And the best example or quote for that is that Thomas Edison failed 1,000 times in creating the light bulb before he actually succeeded. And I always think about that quote when I'm thinking about failure, because I have to ask myself whether or not would I have done the 990th try of the light bulb, or would I have given up before then? Right? It's a question that it's, I think, a great question to ask any potential entrepreneur. Like, where would you give up? Would you keep trying 1,000 times? And if you didn't, we would have a very different story about the light bulb. So that's my
That's
advice.
so like when you just specifically mentioned that, like, will you have that sort of a patience of, let's say, going till the 10,000th time or nine kids time or something? I was just thinking, right? Like, patience is something that everyone really like. Like, whenever you talk to a successful entrepreneur, he definitely will mention that patience is necessary, or trying multiple times is necessary. But then at times, with the way the world works, right, especially now with how
Yes.
everything is
Yes.
moving fastly, like with the AI coming in and everything happening at a really fast sort of a pace, it's just difficult to know that what is like, is it like, when to identify that being patient is helpful, or is it like, am I doing something wrong? Is this, let's say, just a patient sort of a thing that I need to be like, just when you try and talk to let's say, prospect, right?
Yes.
At times you reach out to him 3 times, 4 times, fifth time, like just as an example, right? And when you are on the fifth time, you're like, have I done something wrong? Like, was my pitch not good enough, or was it, or I just need to keep on reminding him back?
Yeah.
Because most of the times people are not really answering in a way that, oh, I didn't like that or something. They're like, oh, I'm just working on this. I'm busy on something. I'll definitely come back to you in a week, in
Yeah.
another week, in another week. Like it's a cycle, right? So
Yeah.
at times for everyone that is, let's say, trying to be patient, it's also important for that person to have that sort of a self belief that it's not something that you have, let's say, done wrong, but it's more about just waiting. Because
Yes.
obviously, right, there'll be instances when you have made a mistake, and that's the reason that you're not really, maybe, let's say, that's the reason of a particular thing not working, a particular client not onboarding or something, right?
Right.
But if the same thing keeps on happening, and obviously you're getting the feedback from the right people, because getting feedback is like really important. But the mix of, or let's say, deciding when it's about patience or when it's about you improving is a thing that every person or every entrepreneur just keeps on juggling, that okay,
I
I
love
need
that
to
you
figure that
mentioned
out.
that. Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because it's context, right? What you're talking about our society is an important factor when we talk about patience, because the expectation that we as people of instantaneous delivery is just, it's getting shorter and shorter. The amount of time people spend on a website before they jump off, the amount of time people spend watching a video on social media gets shorter and shorter and shorter. The you know the amount of time people are willing to stay with a product and give it a chance before they jump off to a different product. All of these numbers, we can look at it consistently across the board. The attention span for human beings is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and it's being driven by the lifestyles that we're living. So yes, that is an important factor. And the other piece of context is, I would say that if it was a sales process and you failed 999 times, then there's something wrong with your sales process if you haven't closed, because that would be a 0.01% close rate. And that's
True.
horrible, right? So
Yeah.
that's terrible. And so you'd need to look at what's wrong with your process. But you made the example, you said, what if I reached out to a client like 5 times and they didn't, the potential client, and they didn't respond? I don't know if this stat is still relevant. I have to look it up. But a few years ago, the statistic was that it takes 9 touch points to
Yeah.
convert a
It's
sale on
12.
average. It's 12 now? Okay.
It's not 12.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's gone up again. So on average, 12 touch points for someone to make a sale. So if you stop
Yeah.
at 5, you stop like more than halfway, like less
Yeah.
than halfway before.
Yeah.
And most business owners that I know are not committed to 12 touch points.
That's so true.
Right?
Because that's something, like, I was just talking to someone, and one of the things that he mentioned to me that has stayed with me has been that he mentioned he reaches out to a contact till the time they say no. It's like, I don't really care. I have a process of reaching out to them till the time, like, they have to say, don't contact
Don't
me, or they
contact
have to
me
say,
anymore.
or, or they need to say that I have chosen someone else. And I was like,
Yes.
this is like, that makes, at times it feels like it's lame or something, but it makes like complete sense. And
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the last few months, I just tried doing that, and I would have closed at least 3 clients that I never expected that I'll close. Like, they were in the pipeline for, like, say, 6 or 9 months,
Yep. Yep.
and there was a
I do the
particular time.
same thing. I leave people in the pipeline and I will go back to them. If I followed up with them, say 3 to 4 times in the immediate time frame, and they say no, not interested, or they say, like, unless they say, as that colleague of yours said, leave me alone, I will bump them for 2 to 3 months,
Yeah,
because for me, I know that in a quarter, a person's business can change drastically. And
yeah,
so they may have been at a point where working with me didn't make any sense to them, but a quarter from now, working with me may make more sense to them now.
Yeah.
And so I'm one of those things that you might need me a year from now. You might need me 2 years from now. You might
Yeah.
have been working with a business coach 6 months ago, but you fired that person because they weren't making a difference with you. And if I show up at the
Yeah.
right time, then maybe that's a potential client for me. So yeah, it has to be, you have to understand now, that's my business. That's specific to my business. You have to understand your own business and your own sales cycle and what makes sense in terms of follow up. But yeah, 12 times, 12 touch points. And for people who don't understand that term touch point, because sometimes it gets a little confusing, that's not necessarily 12 phone calls. That's, you know, an email counts as a touch point.
Yeah.
Them visiting your website counts as a touch point. You know, a text message from you counts as a touch point, but it takes 12 times on average of someone connecting with a customer, and their different ways of connecting with the customer before that customer will choose to purchase from you. Yeah.
Like, completely makes sense. And I have really experienced that myself and seen that, okay, that really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally. Right. So, okay, now we'll come on to the last segment. So what we do is, for any guest that comes on our podcast, we ask them one question that we will ask the next guest. And
I love it.
we'll ask you a question that we got from the last one before we get the question for the next one.
Okay.
So the question that we got from the last episode was, how do you, like, with AI coming in and everything changing quickly, how do you retain your people? And when I say your people, I mean your team. So that was his question.
With AI coming in, how do I retain my team? Okay, so the first thing is that I empower my team to use AI. I think that AI education and AI knowledge is a critical, important part for any small business owner. I'm just about to launch my own podcast that will be providing practical AI tips for entrepreneurs and small business owners to use. So I embrace AI. I have a pretty good retention rate for my team because I think that the relationships that I establish with my team are what makes a difference. I tend to manage pretty flat, meaning that there's no hierarchy in any of my businesses. Just because I'm the CEO doesn't mean that I know more than my administrative assistant or my social media manager. In fact, inside of social media, my social media manager is way smarter than I am. And so I empower my team, and I love working with them. So, you know, I choose, they say, you know, I choose slowly and I fire quickly. Is that there's a human resources principle that goes that way. And when I say I fire quickly, it means, like, if I'm clear there's not a fit, I don't keep that person around. I think for both of our sakes, they're not going to be happy working with me, and I'm not going to be happy working with them. We should just part ways. But I hire slowly. I take my time to pick someone that I'm going to work with, because fit is very important, and it's important to me, and I want it to be important to them. So inside of my hiring process, I'm always looking for, am I able to fulfill on what my staff is looking to get out of being a part of my team? And can they fulfill on what I need by being part of the team? And it's got to be a win-win scenario. Otherwise, there's no point in bringing that person on board. Yeah.
Like, especially the part of, it has to be a two-way sort of a thing. It's not like they're not just going to work for you.
Yes.
Even you need to get things done from them. So it has to work for both the people,
Yeah.
right? Like, both the parties involved there. And that's something that I take in as well. Obviously, come with, like, as I mentioned, it's been close to 6.5 years.
Yes.
Out of which 3 years is when I started my own business. So I've done, let's say, maybe 15 to 20 people is what I've hired in that sort of time. But
Yeah.
One thing that I've got from that is it has to really work for both the parties. It has to be in a way that, okay, it makes sense to both of them, because they're not just joining company, that they're going to make themselves a big part of the organizations, and therefore they need to really see if that really works for them, because they're
Absolutely.
going to spend a lot of time, and that's something that's going to define the next set of years for them as well, because the years that they'll spend will give them the wisdom, the knowledge, the way to work for the next part of their life. So yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. So we got the answer. Now we are looking for the question that
Looking for
we
a
should ask.
question. All right. Question. I'm going to stay in the theme of the freedom lifestyle thing. So so the question for the next guest would be, how do you define your ideal life, and what steps are you currently taking to live your own freedom lifestyle?
Okay. Let me have that. Perfect. I have that
All right.
question, and this is going to be a really interesting one to get an answer on.
Now I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen to the next episode because I want to hear who gets answered, how it gets answered.
Sure. Even I want to think about this after the podcast and think about what my answer is. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, Daman, thanks a lot for doing this. It was, I guess, the longest podcast that we have had till now, because it had that much of value. This is the first podcast for this year, so
Yeah.
really starting on a high note is something amazing as well. Amazing for the viewers. So yeah, like this was amazing. Again, thanks a lot for doing this.
Thank you.
And yeah, like I will just click on